level, you'll notice that the room starts stretching, which means that the deaths kind of start losing you a little bit more time, and it also becomes a little bit harder to avoid deaths. There are definitely more technically demanding areas. This is probably one of the biggest hurdles for new players, this particular room. And you have to cross through a series of bridges with this dust, and the timing is all over the place. And if you end up getting stuck, it can be very difficult. Oh, no! Now, normally when you get that key, you would retry the area, because when she respawns, she'll take the key with her, and it saves you having to go back to the other side of the room. However, we were just a teensy bit off of grabbing that key, so now we have to go through it again. There we go, we have it. We have managed to cross the bridge. Even with that reset, it still is not a very big time loss. It does not take very much time to cross over the bridge. The thing about this game is that every room, there are multiple possibilities for death. As you can see, pretty much anything you touch is a death. But the deaths really don't cost too much time, so even having some major hiccup rooms, you can still do very, very well, and even if you have one room that's rough, you can move right on. Now we're up on the roof where the hotel keeper, Oshiro, is chasing after the player. You'll see he's going to go to the player's height level and then dash across the screen. And so the player has to time in and out, moving through these sections while also avoiding his dashing. And you can see that, again, for newer players, this can really be a major hurdle. But having a route in place and having it planned out really can make it, maybe not trivial, but it almost seems like there's no risk of Oshiro for the player. We're going to go ahead, we have about 3 more rooms, and this room can be a bit of a hiccup for players. The next room's not too bad, it just sort of depends. And then the last room can really be a major time killer for a lot of people. We're heading into the last room now, and it's going to be a very, very long room. There's going to be a lot of possibilities for Oshiro to get to them. So through the first section here, here's a couple of dust balls. Up and over, and this is where things can really get dangerous, this kind of interlocking set of things, because you're forced to dash horizontally for a lot of this, so if you end up getting caught and dashing at the wrong time, you can catch the player. And there we go, no mistakes whatsoever, that's fantastic. That is through Chapter 3, we've managed to pick up a berry, only about 9 deaths, that is very, very respectable. Chapter 3 can be very difficult for players.
With that being said, is it okay if I read off a donation real fast?
Absolutely.
We have a $10 donation from FC Racers stating, "Have to donate for my favorite game of 2018. Good luck to the runner."
Woo, thank you, FC. All right.
Flight attendant. I'll be back later.
And we are into Chapter 4 here. You're going to see immediately a new concept presented in the form of this wind here. And you can see, based on the snow falling, if the wind is blowing for or against the player. If it's blowing against them, then they're going to be getting pushed back constantly, and if it's blowing for them, then they're going to be getting pushed forward. And it really can make it, again, in a normal run, very, very difficult for players. Suddenly it feels like you can't really just move forward at all without dashing. So you really have to plan your dashes carefully. There's these platforms going back and forth under certain timing. You saw the clouds at the beginning of the level, so there's really, just about in every level you'll see at least 2 or 3 new concepts presented. And then for the finale for Chapter 7, you're going to see all of them kind of come back for little vignettes. Here we go, just sliding down. Oh, gotta get that second lock switch. There we go. And here are the clouds. When you jump on them, they'll spring down for just a bit and then spring up, allowing you to jump higher than you otherwise would. The white ones you can jump on over and over and over again. There'll be some pink clouds. And for the pink clouds, if you jump off of them, they will disappear as soon as you have bounced one time. So you have to be very, very careful about that. And here we go. Here's a wall bounce. By being able to dash and jump off that wall, the player is able to get much higher than they might otherwise be able to. So by doing so, they can circumvent a lot of areas. You've seen it a couple of times here in the run, but that's definitely a major time save there. We'll probably see wall bouncing a little bit later. Here is a room that can be very, very scary. The player can sometimes, if they choose to, actually dash across that gap, but it's very, very finicky in timing. KingJ is opting for a little bit of a safer, more consistent route. You can see that wind really pushes the player hard. It can make it very, very difficult to make any progress without dashing. Again, once you have it routed out, it makes it a lot easier, but in some cases this area can be very difficult because while you have some flexibility in your dashing in other areas, you know, if you miss, it might not end up as clean as you want, but it's not going to be maybe any time loss or death or anything. With the wind blowing, you really have to be a lot more precise in this chapter, so it can be very, very difficult. You can see that under normal circumstances, he would have been able to hit that wall just fine, but because of the wind blowing, he's not quite able to make it. There we go. Here is another new kind of block. When the player jumps onto it and actually grabs onto it, you'll see it'll move in the direction listed. There's a nice little hyper dash there, and jumping off that block allows him to skip having to go up and get the second one, so that's a nice little time save. You can see some strawberries here. Some of the strawberries in the game are hidden, and some of them are kind of out in the open, almost like a dare, you know, almost saying, here I am, you just have to figure out how to get me. But again, all of them are optional. It's just a fun little challenge if you're looking for something else to do in the game. There are also a number of kind of additional sections that you can do that have the same themes as these, but are a lot more technically difficult. Here's one where the wind blows a little bit on and off, so you have to kind of time the wind as you do these jumps. And there we go, first try. Ooh, close on those spikes there. We've now moved into the final section. The wind is going to blow harder than you've seen it in any other section here. The point that the player really cannot walk forward at all without dashing. He's going to have to navigate through a number of rooms here. And coming up in this next one, we'll see it in just a second. Here they are. You see these snowballs coming. And they're going to, similar to Oshiro, appear exactly level with the player. And if the player hits them head-on or below the ball, they kill the player. If they hit it above the ball, it'll bounce them a little bit, and like other things, they'll get their dash back. So they really have to be avoiding that. And again, trying to move forward by dashing, you often are dashing horizontally, so if you do it at the wrong time, you're probably going to take a snowball to the face and have to restart the level. Or at least restart the room. Here we go, look at that. Almost like those snowballs aren't even there. KingJo is going through very, very nicely. This is a very good chapter 4. We've got just a couple of rooms to go here. There are those bubbles. The player gets to choose which way those bubbles dash. By aiming to stick in a direction once you go into it, the bubble will dash for you. And one more, there we go, the wind's blowing with, and we are through. That is chapter 4. We can see on that ending cutscene that Theo has shown up. However, since we are skipping the cutscene, we don't actually really see how Theo got there, so that's something that you can find out playing through the game. Here we are in Chapter 5, The Temple, and again, there's going to be a whole slew of mechanical concepts coming up here. The most immediate one is going to be these blocks here. When Madeline dashes, you're going to see that these blocks are going to activate and go from one side of their rail to the other before slowly moving back. So the player has to time dashes. There's also these button switches. There are these red bubbles here that'll move along until they hit a wall or until the player dashes out of them. So you can see just every single level just has these new mechanical concepts, but each one is, I would either say it's intuitive or you can pick it up very quickly. There's some spikes that go back and forth under some predetermined timing that you have to avoid, so it's certainly a very technically challenging game. Alright, we are through the first key door, and there is Theo going to skip it again. Sorry, Theo. We'll see you a little bit later in this chapter. He's going to come into play in a major way, and this is really going to be about the only time you see Theo in the run. And now we have just another couple of rooms before we get on to kind of the meat of this chapter. The player is going to enter into the mirror world, and everything is going to get a little bit crazy. Then we're going to see a section where they're actually going to be reunited with Theo, and they and Theo are going to move through the rest of the temple, so a good amount coming up here. I don't think we've really addressed it before, but those green gems, if the player touches them, will give them their dash back. So in certain areas where you have to go through without touching the ground very often, you can use those green gems to manage to make it through. And here we go, we're hitting one button, and hitting two, and it's into the mirror we go. We're going to take control of a Seeker here. We don't get to control the Seeker for any other part of the game. This is just kind of an introduction to them. but they are going to be an enemy of ours for the rest of this chapter. Basically how the Seeker works is that as you move through, the Seeker's going to kind of dash towards the player and slowly arc towards them. The player's going to have to navigate around them while doing these next few rooms. I think we'll see it in 2 or 3 rooms. There's Battleline again, having a little chat with the player. We don't have time for chatting. We are speeding. You can see again with the timing here, you really have to time when you're dashing, and you have to be very aware of just all the pieces at play in each of these rooms, and it can be very difficult for a player. There's our first Seeker. That one doesn't really come into play, but you're going to see these next ones coming in. And some of these rooms can be very, very difficult to navigate around the Seeker while still moving back. In each one, you're generally going to have to hit these lock switches. You can see that the Seekers can actually hit them for you. So in some of them, we're actually going to not only navigate around the Seekers, but actually use them to help. And like most other mechanics in this game, jumping on top of the Seeker will neutralize, as you can see, we'll bounce off it, we'll get our dash back. There we go, having a little bit of a hiccup. We can bounce on the Seeker. If the Seeker bounces on us, it doesn't end quite as well. Okay, last room of the Seekers for now. This one can be a little bit of a challenge because you have to dodge in and out of it multiple times. Again, the Seeker area can be very, very difficult for newer players. Just because, again, if you have even the slightest bit of a mistake or you hesitate on the timing or anything like that, it can really throw off a lot of things. So now we're coming up to the biggest skip in an any percent run. And it's actually very technically easy, though it almost looks kind of like a magic trick. Basically, you can dash in one direction, but then immediately change which way you're going. And if we do it off this wall here, we're able to go just far enough that we can actually jump completely over this. Normally the player is required to get 2 or 3 keys to be able to move on, but by doing that one trick there, you save almost a minute, and it can actually end up being almost 2 or 3, depending on how new you are to the run and what route you're taking. So it can really be a huge time save. It is the single biggest time save in the run. Most of the sort of bigger tricks that you can do really only save you just a couple of seconds here and there. There we go, we actually use that one to break open the block for us to get to that door switch and then move on. And here is Theo. For the first time you actually really get to see him. He's been imprisoned in a crystal, and the player is going to have to carry him through the level, having him hit buttons and switches to be able to progress on. You can see that he can press buttons for you. You can also go dash and hit the buttons yourself. Naturally, since this is a speedrun, it's much, much faster to be able to carry him with us and just throw him when we need to, like you can see there. One of the biggest issues with carrying Theo is that you move a little bit slower and you also can't dash, so you're going to see the player throw Theo and be dashing a lot to be able to maintain speed. Maintaining speed with Theo is one of the... Ooh, that was a very close avoidance of the Seeker. It can be very, very difficult to actually be able to move quickly with him, and you really need to be able to move quickly to be able to dodge these Seekers here. We go riding a platform, and we're quite able to make it along, and now we have to kind of dodge the Shark Tank here. There we go, a double hop takes care of both of them. And King J gets to move on to the next room. Cutting it very close there. We've got just a couple more rooms to go here until we finish off chapter 4. For a lot of newer players, just doing their first kind of casual playthrough, I think that this is one of the hardest parts of the game for them, just because there's so much going on and the Seekers really don't let up, and sometimes the Seeker movement can seem a little bit crazy to a new player. But you can see King J really going through with almost no trouble whatsoever in that section. There's a couple of pulse waves here continuously pushing the player back. There's not really any danger. Occasionally you can actually dash through while Theo gets thrown back in such a way that Theo gets crushed, but it's very, very rare to see a death in that. 6 minutes in the temple, that's again a very good time. And we are moving into Reflection, which probably has the biggest build-up and a very large fight towards the end of it. But we'll talk about that when we get here. For now, the big new introduction is these feathers that the player can use to float. They will be flying along, and they can choose what direction that they fly in for a limited amount of time. That's going to be a really big one, and the kind of story part of this game, you're going to notice a big change in looks here, is that the player confronts Battleline, and Battleline throws the player all the way down to the foot of the mountain. So we're now down at the very base of the mountain in a large jungle full of these crystals and things. The player's going to navigate through with these feathers for a time. And coming up, we're also going to see where the player can kind of choose which route they want to take, which is a very unique aspect. Normally, there's really only kind of one way you can go, or you might be able to choose multiple ways, but they all, you know, like in Chapter 3, where you have 3 places you can go, but you have to do all of them. This is the first one where the player truly has control of which route they want to take to get through to the next area. You're going to see these blocks here. When you hit them, they're going to dash towards the direction of the hit, making a fun little grumbling sound, as you can hear. And as a result of that, you can use their momentum to be able to jump in ways you normally couldn't, like you can see there. Madeline does go a lot farther when you are able to dash off of one of them while they're already moving. And now we're at this section where you can choose. You can kind of go to a top or bottom route, just about in every room here. And then you'll, once you pick one, you'll kind of go through and then you'll end up at a choice of rooms again. So there is kind of a standard route that most people agree is faster. So far, this has been fairly standard. Some people might change up, you know, going top or bottom for one of these, just depending on what they feel more comfortable with. But for the most part, most people tend to go to the route that KingJ is going right now. There's some little pinballs that you see there. If you jump off of them, they'll bounce you back in the direction from which you hit them, and the player will get their dash back again. Most of the, as I've mentioned, most of the concepts in this game are really big on giving the player the dash back. And in that way, the game really has a lot of flexibility of what the character can and can't do once they've left the ground. Now you'll notice that in that particular spot there, while walking, Madeline would be too big to walk through those crystals, but when you dash, you actually become just briefly a little bit smaller. And because of that fact, Madeline is able to kind of sneak under that crystal there. Right, we're going through a long feather room. We're going to go through just a little bit more here, and then we're going to kind of build up towards the big fight. This is probably this is another large potential time save or potential time loss. Sometimes players can have trouble getting through those pinballs there, and it can really end up being a lot of time loss. There's Granny. Again, we just say hi to her very briefly and keep moving, and now you're going to see the player is kind of pursuing after Battleline. That's her hair that is sort of receding in the background there. And after going through a number of these rooms, the player is going to end up fighting against Battleline, where in every room Battleline is going to be shooting lasers, or she's going to be throwing pulse orbs, and the player is going to have to avoid all of these while progressing through and getting to her multiple times in some rooms. Or in most rooms, to be able to move on, and it really ends up being very high energy. It's very climactic. Again, for a lot of new players, it can be very difficult because you have to be juggling a lot of things. For speedrunners, normally they have either a route planned or a couple of different ways that they can kind of go through the room depending on timing. Again, you sort of have to have a backup strat between the first time you enter a room and if you have to reset in it. Ooh, uh-oh, we have just jumped a little bit too far. Let's try that again. By doing this dash here, the player is able to get a ton of momentum and shoot right through. And here we go. Here starts the fight, and you can immediately tell, just from the music, it is an entirely different set of pacing. There's blocks falling, there's orbs getting shot out, there's crystals lining the ground. It's very, very fast-paced going. There we go. And we're going to see, again, a lot of hyper dashing and a lot of wave dashing to be able to move on through all of this. And here come the lasers. You can kind of see where the laser is going to be firing, and it'll lock onto where the player is. And after a few seconds, it will lock into one position and fire. So the player has to either make sure that they're out of the way when it's going off, or ideally, as a speedrunner, just hit her before she has time to fire it. You can see that for a lot of these, she's going to get hit before she even has time to fire the laser. you can see that despite the kind of tracer sight being relatively small, that laser's kind of big. You really do have to avoid it. A lot of very nice navigation going from King J here. There we go, there's one laser dodged. There's the second before it can get off. So far it's been a very, very clean battle and fight. Just barely dodging that one there as well. It certainly stays tense. At just about any moment, if you jump wrong or dash just a little bit too late, that can really make the difference between having to start a room over or not. Some of these can get very long and the timing is very specific, so you can really lose a lot of time on a number of these rooms.
Wow, dude.
There we go, trying the room a second time. There's one hit. Going through the feathers, and there is the second hit, moving on. Ooh, another slight little hiccup there. That can be very troublesome. Sometimes just at the end of the room, you know, you just kind of relax a little bit, and that can definitely happen. There we go, made it through.
Fucking hell.
You can see the pinballs can be used to either get out of the way quickly in the case of a laser, or be able to move on here. Alright, we're going to go through another couple of rooms here. This is probably one of the more tense timings of the laser. If you're not able to jump through those crystals fast enough, there's really very little that can save you from getting hit. And right after this long room, we're going to see a little bit of a heart-to-heart between Battler and player here. Narrowly ducks under it, and we're into the heart-to-heart. One of the few areas that is not actually a cutscene, despite there being dialogue going on. Alright, we're into the back half of the battle line fight now. You're going to see that the player has to use a lot of these moving blocks now, which really just adds a lot more to the juggling. It really affects the timing of what you're doing here, even more so than the other couple of areas that were already doing it for the battle and fight. So far, so good. Moving through very quickly, very clean. Just a little bit of a hitch there. Alright. And we just have a couple more of these rooms to do here after this one. You can see again, using that momentum, you're able to jump up higher than the crystals would normally allow you. There's only 2 rooms left here for this fight. This one's going to be a fairly long one, and then the last one is going to be a gauntlet of laser bullets. Okay, so far so good. Last one. And he is through it. Here's going to be the last room, and you'll see the player is just going to keep on moving to the right, dodging laser, after laser, after laser, after laser. Ooh, and that dash just barely manages to move him out of harm's way, and there we go. That is the fight. Now the 2 of them are going to make up, and now you're going to see the player has 2 dashes each time that they leave the ground. You see the pink hair to show that you have 2. Every time the player dashes, it's going to change back to the red hair to show you have 1. And then back to normal hair to show that you have none remaining. And that is Chapter 6. Moving on to Chapter 7, you're going to see it being a lot faster paced than you might have seen any of these other ones. Again, it's going to be a little vignette of every other section. You're going to see it starting with sort of the jungle section, then we're going to move back to Chapter 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the temple. And for each one, it's going to really just show what having 2 dashes can do to move through a lot of this. Again, this is a very, very long area for new players. There's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of navigating through areas, but through a combination of these hyper and wave dashes, as well as having a double dash, the player is really able to kind of move a lot quicker, move a lot more fluidly, navigate through a lot more things, and it really is a very satisfying ending to the run of just being able to go through all of these sections again and kind of triumph over them as you get back towards the summit. Afterwards, ooh, a little bit of trouble there. I accidentally used that second dash a little bit early. Getting towards the final area, you're going to see a number of flags. It's going to be the ending summit, and the player is going to go through each flag getting up to the ending, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get up closer. For now, we're just going to move up through each section. You can see there's the ending of the first one, and in the final room of each first one, there's going to be that purple orb, and the player has to seek it out in every area, and Badline will thrust the player up each time until the very final one when she's going to thrust them up into the new section. Alright, moving through, and again, you're going to see all these concepts kind of revisited in each of these sections. So here's going to be these blocks here. You're going to see a lot more of kind of the enclosed area. Here's all of the city infrastructure. And the player is going to be able to go through much faster now that they have these double dashes. Each area is going to last just a couple of minutes. Generally, you'll spend about somewhere between a third and a quarter of your time of the total run spent in this particular chapter. And of that, each run is going to take just a couple of minutes here and there, each particular spot. So here we go, the last room of 500 revisited. And King J is through it, moving on to 1000 meter. You'll see here are the dream blocks again. Since the dream blocks give you back both of your dashes, regardless of how many you had left going into them, you'll see that it almost feels like Madeline does not even touch the ground for a number of rooms. I think you can go 6 or 7 rooms without actually having to touch the ground here. Besides maybe doing a little hop here and there. So it can probably be one of the most fluid spots in the run in general, just because the double dash combined with moving through can really just keep you going. It can be a very satisfying part of the run for a lot of people for that reason. So while it's very fluid, it's certainly still very technically demanding. You'll see that they really have to time exactly when they're going through these dream blocks, and they really have to know exactly how they're dashing through them. This takes a lot of planning to be able to get through it as fluidly as King J is doing right now. Look at that, instead of doing a horizontal and vertical, he just times it right and goes right through both of them like that. That is 1000 complete going on to 1500. And 1500, again, similar to Chapter 3, 1500 is a very big hang-up for newer runners, because not only does it have them moving a little bit faster, these dust balls, but the rooms are also in general a little bit longer. We're going to start out with a couple of shorter ones here. This lock switch room right here can be a big hang-up because they just go very, very quickly. Look at that, like it's nothing. This is a very, very long room here, and again, if the player dies at any point of it, they do have to go back to the very beginning, so there's a lot of possible spots that King J could get stuck. Here we go, he's through most of it, he just has one section left, and he is through. Fantastic. And here's probably the other very large room of this chapter. And he's through the first hitch so far, now he has to go through all of these dust balls jumping vertically. And he's made it, excellent! This is a very clean summit so far. You can see this is not an area that a player in their first playthrough might go to, or if they do, they just get the strawberry, but you can see that it's actually a little bit of a secret that allows you to save just a little bit of time going through as a speedrun. And again, the game does have a couple of these littered here and there, just these little speedrunning secrets that you can do. We're on the last room. Again, the timing of this can be very, very difficult, and you can lose quite a bit of time if you end up having a hitch in one of these final rooms, but again, King J's through it with absolutely no trouble whatsoever. Now we have come into the Golden Ridge section of the summit again, so we're going to see clouds, we're going to see wind. You can see that by coming through this top spot, again, it's not a route that somebody on their casual run might necessarily do. In fact, a lot of casual players might not even realize you can go up there, but by doing so, we're able to save just a couple of seconds here. There we go. You can see the wind blows very, very strongly here. You make basically no progress at all moving normally. You really do have to dash. And look at that, falling down right into that bubble. There's a little snowball hit. And he's through it. And in similar sequence to the 1500 section, you're going to see a lot of these rooms are very, very long as a result. A lot of them can be major, major time loss if you have a problem with it. Alright, and he is riding that directional block up. There we go. Now we're going to do the same thing, but going up instead of to the right. Gotta navigate through a lot of these crystals here. There's not a whole lot of room. There we go. And he is through. Just a couple more rooms to go until we are heading on to the temple portion at 2500. Ooh, a little bit of a hiccup there. With the wind blowing with you, it can be hard exactly to judge exactly how far you've gone. That can be very difficult. Alright, and look, in this case, he jumps off it so fast the block does not even have time to realize that he's grabbed onto it. That's how fast he's going through these sections right now. So here's the final room of 2000. You see that basically as soon as he comes out, he's already dashing. There's no, time taken to kind of get his bearings. He knows exactly what he's doing, where he's going here. And there's a lot of dashes being done in quick, really perfect succession. Alright, here we go into 2500. This is the temple section. And there can be probably some of the most demanding tech in the game here. It's going to be interesting to see which tricks he's going to choose to do and which ones he's going to take a safe route for. I know for a fact that he is going to do something known as door skip, which happens at the end of this section. And basically how it works is that the player's going to hit a room where there are 2 buttons that they need to hit, but he's going to skip hitting both buttons. You can see navigating through a big section of these blocks, and they're, alternating which way they're going when you dash, so it can be very, very difficult for new players to keep track of. Here we go, dodging through all these buzzsaws. And he's made it through. First try, no trouble. And again, we do retry because it is a little bit quicker than actually navigating back down through the room. It saves you just a couple of seconds here and there. Alright. Just another couple of rooms there before we come up to the 3000 section. You can see again, the timing is very, very precise for being able to move through these. Ooh, couldn't quite make it through that gap. Alright, and here we are to door skip. And through the first one just fine. Look at how small of a window that is. Can he do the second? Yes! First try! Look at that! If you are sitting at home watching, you should quietly give a round of applause. That is not as easy as he makes it look. Alright, going through the final room of 2500. Again, this is a very, very long room, and there are plenty of ways that you can accidentally get caught. It really requires a lot of precision in how the player moves through here. Even the slightest mistake can send you back to the beginning, and that is about 15 or 20 seconds of time lost. Alright, we are to the final section. You notice that there was a flag there at the very beginning. Nice of him to go back there and show that to you guys. Since these next couple of rooms are so long, rather than waiting for a screen